Hello everyone, my name is Xavier Sonori. I am a plat level Cassio main from the North America server. I've been playing Cassiopeia for about 2.5 years. I started at the beginning of Season 2, and around the beginning of Season 3 I made another guide on Cassiopeia, but due to the recent changes in her playstyle as a result of patch 4.16 rework, I decided to make a new Cassio guide just to kind of teach the intricacies and the change in playstyle that you will experience with the new reworked Cassiopeia. One thing to note is that I've seen Cassiopeia is generally an AP mid. She excels at high burst damage late game. She used to be a harass heavy champion and a lane bully, but due to the changes in the patch 4.16, her bullying has actually decreased quite significantly. Now she does very low damage early game. Her early game is actually pretty weak, but around the 20-minute mark she starts to gain a lot of strength, and by 40 minutes she becomes a monster. This is because she has a new passive which scales with stacks that I'll explain a little bit in a moment, and as you collect more and more stacks, she becomes more and more powerful. After you max out at 400 stacks, she gains an additional 30% AP, which makes her so much stronger at that point. But let's cover her skills really quickly before I get the game started. Her Q is from 4.16, basically what they did was they reduced the damage significantly, and in order to compensate, they increased the movement speed late game when you've maxed out Q that you get. So it's actually, when you land Q, it's actually easier in team fights to maneuver and to position, but that came at the cost of quite a significant portion of the Q damage. The W, her miasma, the damage has also been decreased, both base damage and the ratio, but in order to compensate, they increased the slow that it provides. The slow is actually really nice now. Her E is where Riot decided to put most of her damage. They decreased the cooldown to 0.5 seconds, and this actually increased her damage quite a bit because now you can pretty much machine gun her skills. It's actually really nice, but most of her damage comes from that, especially since they increased the ratios in compensation of decreasing the other skills. Her ultimate cooldown was decreased, but at the cost of some of its damage. The decrease was well worth the decrease in cooldown was well worth the decrease in damage because now you have your ult up way more often. It's actually really nice. Her passives, let's just go over that one. Her old passive used to stack up to 5 times every time you used a skill, decreasing the cost of her, the mana cost of her skills by 10% each time you stacked, for a total of 50% decrease. It was actually really nice and helped her sustain in lane and in prolonged team fights, but unfortunately that passive was removed. I really like that passive, but the new one is actually really interesting. Basically, it's a stacking passive. You start with 0 stacks and you can max it out at 400. The stacks are permanent and they can be acquired 3 different ways. 1, when you kill a poisoned minion or neutral monster. 2, for every second that an enemy champion is poisoned, you gain a stack. So landing a Q, which ticks 3 times, gives you 3 stacks automatically. And finally, every time you land an E, you gain a stack. Basically, at 75 stacks, she gains Spell Vamp off of her E. At 200 stacks, she gains a little bit of ability power, and she gains 25% cooldown reduction, which is really nice. And at 400 stacks, sorry, she gains 30% ability power. That's absolutely huge. It makes her a monster when she hits the 400 stacks. But let's get this game started. One thing to note is I'm against the Zed. This is actually a normal game, and you'll notice that I took Ignite in this game. Normally I would not take Ignite versus Zed or any other assassin because Cassiopeia's early game is a lot weaker now, so your chance of getting an early kill without the jungler's help is lower. So instead you take Exhaust against most matchups, especially against assassins, so that they cannot ult in you early on and basically ruin the game for you. So let's go ahead and get this started. So Cassiopeia has a standard start that most AP mids do. She has Doran's Ring, 2 health potions. If you do opt for tier, and I'll talk about this a little later, you can start Fairy Charm pots and a ward, which is actually really nice, especially if you end up going top lane and you start tier, or you first buy tier. But this is a general buy on most AP mids, Cassiopeia included. You'll notice what I'm doing is I'm getting out of the base immediately and I'm going toward this bush. This is something you should do with most mids. It's not something that's specific to Cassiopeia. And the reason I ward this bush is because as long as you get your ward down before 1 minute, your ward will be up your trinket ward will be up in time to ward during the laning phase to defend yourself against jungle camps, or the jungler. So essentially, you just want to get this ward out because it's free vision. You'll have it up in time to ward again. One other thing to note, I'm currently playing against 2 diamonds and 3 platinums.
30 seconds until minions spawn.
My teammates are like 2 silvers, a gold, and I'm playing platinum. If you had higher skill level people or people you were communicating with, you would generally invade with Blitzcrank. It's just something you do. It's because Blitzcrank's invade is ridiculously strong. There's nothing better than being able to pull an enemy champion towards your 5-person team. You can basically annihilate them instantly. But we didn't invade this game because Blitzcrank didn't know any better, although later it's apparent that the Blitzcrank does know what he's doing. He's actually a really good Blitzcrank for the most part.
A summoner has
Let's fast forward this a little bit. We're gonna go to lane over here. And you'll see basically what I try to do is I start trying to land Qs on Zed. And the reason I'm doing this is because I want to start stacking up. Every Q that I'm able to land on him is 3 free stacks. Cassio's mana sustain in lane is actually really poor before you get your first buy. So you have to be a little bit careful with the way you're harassing, but as long as you're last hitting with her E, which I forgot to mention, returns the mana that she spends on it and gives her back 3% of her maximum mana if she last hits with it. This is a huge change in Cassio's playstyle because now it encourages her to basically last hit minions with her E all the time. It used to be that the E was so expensive before patch 4.6 that it wasn't worth last hitting with. But now, because it returns the mana to you, you want to last hit with Cassiopeia whenever you get the opportunity. So what you'll see is that every time Zed comes into last hit, I'll try to land a Q on him. This is because when the champion last hit, they have to stay still for a second. And this is basically your opportunity to get free damage on them, and in Cassio's case, to get free stacks. One thing you'll note is that I just landed an E on Zed, and the reason I did this is because even though I didn't have him poisoned so that E didn't reset, I have enough mana to afford doing that, and it gives me 1 free stack, on top of doing a little bit of damage to him, so it was well worth it. If your mana starts getting low, obviously harassing with an E is not something that you should be doing, especially if you don't land, if you didn't poison the enemy first. So I'm going to fast forward this a little bit. This is just us farming in lane. Essentially, as Cassiopeia, it's imperative, even more so than before, that you farm your minions. You want to preferably poison the minions and then kill them with your E if possible. This will give you a stack and refund the cost of the E, plus an additional 3% maximum mana. So over here, this is something I didn't see. It's past the 4-minute mark. I made a mistake because I should have warded. You generally want to ward at the 3-minute mark. It wouldn't have helped regardless because my trinket ward would already be down, and I wouldn't have seen him coming through here. But you'll see what I do. When I get ganked by Kha'Zix, I realize that Cassio now is actually has a relatively weak early game, so it's going to be hard for me, even before pre-6, to take on both at the same time. So you'll see me do something that most people don't do, and that's preemptively flash. I think what a lot of people do in solo queue is that they hope to get out of situations with their flash, and what happens is that either they don't flash in time and they end up wasting their flash and dying anyway, or they flash only to have to leave anyway because they've already taken too much damage. So my thought process in this moment was I'll just preemptively flash, he'll leave me alone, and then I'll still be able to stay in lane because I haven't taken damage hoping to save flash. So you'll see me preemptively flash. What happens is, halfway through I realize I'm going to die, but I see a Mumu is coming to help me out, so I turn and try to do as much damage as possible on the Zed. So I see him here, I preemptively flash backwards. I get ignited, I know I'm going to die, so I turn and do as much damage as I can. A Mumu comes in and gets me, I get an assist. So that was an even trade for us. It's very lucky that a Mumu was there. Anyway, at this point, what you'll see me do is I start to buy the components for a catalyst. The reason I want to take a catalyst is because generally Cassio has 2 options. She can either go the catalyst route into Roa, or she can go the Tear of the Goddess route into Seraph's Embrace. Athene's or Chalice into Athene's used to be an option for her, but it's no longer really an option because Athene's gives you 20% cooldown reduction, but with her passive, Cassio already gets a free 25%. So if you're taking the 25% off her passive, 5% off your masteries, and let's say you have blue buff, you already have 40% cooldown reduction without having any items. So essentially if you buy Athene's Unholy Grail, or Chalice into Athene's Unholy Grail, you're wasting 20% cooldown reduction stat. More importantly though, Cassiopeia needs mana. She needs a large mana pool now because she doesn't have the reduction in mana cost off of her passive anymore. So you can have all the mana regen you want in the world that Athene's provides, but it doesn't matter because you're going to go instantly because your spells cost quite a bit of mana and you can no longer spam them as readily. And have the mana cost reduced. So you want a large mana pool now after the patch, not just mana regen. So your options are Chalice into Catalyst into Roa or Tear into Seraphs. Against assassins and people who are going to who I'm going to have a hard time against in lane, I generally go Catalyst to Roa because it gives me immediate health and mana. The Tear is something that down the road will give me the Seraph shield and it will give me more mana, but at the time being, it's something that you have to stack. So if I have an easy lane, I'll go Seraphs, or if I have an easy lane, or if I'm behind and can't afford a Catalyst on my first back, I might, or the components to a Catalyst on my first back, I might pick up a Tear. But in this case, I see that I'm not too behind. I have Zed, who is an assassin and can easily kill me in lane, especially during my weak early game. So I opt to go for the components of the Catalyst route, which I will immediately try to upgrade into Roa before even getting T1 boots. The reason you want to upgrade into Rod of Ages as soon as possible is because efficiency-wise, Roa is most valuable against at early levels, because the health and mana regen you get is every time that you level up. As you get to higher levels, it takes more and more time to level up, so the benefit that you get from Rod of Ages, the efficiency, is decreased the longer you wait. So you want to get Roa as soon as possible so you can start stacking it and gaining the benefits right away at your lower levels. So I pick up the components to my Roa, and pick up the components to my Roa and I head back to lane. So let's speed this up a little bit. Back here, farming, harassing him a little bit. So I poisoned him, so I spammed my E's on him. Those are free stacks and I put a lot of damage on him. One thing to note though is that early game your E costs quite a bit of mana, and it can leave you pretty much early on. But here's... So let's move this on a little bit. In a second, Zed will try to all-in me. So we're just farming in lane, and all of a sudden Zed decides to all-in me. It was a really terrible mistake by Zed, because unfortunately I run out of mana, but if I had more mana, this would have been the easiest kill of my life. Unfortunately I run out of mana and I have to back off because he'll kill me. What you'll see now is a mistake that I make. It's basically greed. I stay in lane because I know I need a little bit more mana and I want to get... I mean, it doesn't lead to my death, but this is something that you want to avoid in games, especially as Cassio, where she has no escape. I stay in lane and I get these last hits, but generally you want to back in situations like this. This is because Kha'Zix could just leap over the wall, one-shot me, and leave at any moment. And so it's something that you want to avoid. Luckily, I don't get punished too hard for my greed, and I get to back safely. At this point, I pick up my Catalyst. At this point, when you have your Catalyst, you should recognize that in order to finish off your Roa, you need 1,600 more gold. Just keep that in the back of your mind. Keep glancing at your gold when you're farming in lane, and when you get to 1,600, you generally want to back immediately so you can pick up your Roa and start stacking it immediately. So I return to lane, and I'm just farming. And at this point I run over here. What you should do as your AP carry, or mid in general is buy a pink ward and place it in this bush. The reason you want to place it here is because this is probably the best place to place a ward because it's generally never checked. The option to place it here is a good option, but what happens is as the jungler roams towards bot lane, that bush is generally checked. This is a well-known pink bush, but if you place it here, you provide equal vision in this area towards your top lane, and as long as you hug the upper area, you should be safe. And that bush is generally not checked. So, you'll notice that at around 820, I hit my 75 stacks on my Aspect of the Serpent, so I gained a little bit of ability power, and I gained Spell Vamp off of my E. This is really nice. It helps... Early game, the Spell Vamp is not that great, but it helps her sustain a little bit in lane, which is really nice because of her weak early game. Against champions who have a hard time farming, like for example, Zed has a hard time early on clearing waves, so I'm gonna in a second push him under tower. The reason I want to do this is because I want to start roaming to other lanes, and I want to deny him as much farm as possible. So right now you'll see that I'm pushing him into his tower. So let's speed this up. This is just me harassing him under the tower. Farming lane. Make sure to farm with your E. You last hit for the mana return. So you'll see. Right now, Zed is going to make a terrible decision. He sees that his Kha'Zix is near him, and what's going to happen is Zed's going to try to all-in me when I stop him from backing, and he's going to get himself killed. I make a mistake because I fail to kill him before having to ignite him to get the kill. You'll see. So Zed, I am full health, Zed is really low, and he decides to all-in me here, for some reason. I miss my stuff, and I'm able to kill him, but only by igniting and sending off an auto attack. I run immediately, I use my Q to speed myself up, and I sidestep his damage. He decides to all-in me, and I turn and do as much damage as possible, so we trade. So for that I got a double kill, and that was because he shouldn't have all-inned me. I was able to use my Q to speed myself up, and I was able to dodge his spell. So I just slipped by, and then under the tower, he made the mistake of trying to all-in me under the tower. So at this point, I just got a double kill, so I can pick up my full rod. You want to buy this first, again, because you want to start stacking it as quickly as possible. And you'll see I also pick up my T1 boots. Generally, you want to pick up your T1 boots now because it'll help you, especially against champions with skill shots like Zed, dodge all of his stuff, and also survive games. So here I am, just farming in lane, harassing him when I get the opportunity. At this point, I see... Hold on. At this point, Amumu is in the area, and I see Thresh starting to come up. So I decide to bait Zed in towards my Amumu, because I know that he feels confident that he can kill me because Thresh is there. He all-ins me and finds Amumu and gets instantly killed. Thresh gets away by the skin of his teeth because of the slow that Fox brings and the flash. Now after we just push the mid tower. And what's gonna happen now is I know that my team is in this bottom jungle, so I'm hoping that Kha'Zix will come into the top jungle. So I'm gonna go camp his red buff so I can get to get a bush ult, where I ult him in the face because he doesn't have vision of the bush. Unfortunately, Kha'Zix opts to go here and then go to his wolves instead of to his golems, so I waste my time here. But it's not all waste because I can then come through and pincer the Zed. I come around here, pincer the Zed pretty much gives up, and I make sure to last hit him for good measure. So I push up the lane, make sure to push her into tower so that they lose minion. I farm wraiths because I want to get as many stacks as possible, as quickly as possible, and they're free. Don't farm them when your jungler is in the area because that's rude. But if they're not necessarily in the area, they're pretty much yours. Otherwise, they're just sitting there being wasted. So I go ahead back now, and I pick up T2 boots. This is because I need it for
roaming, I want it for dodging skill shots and all sorts of things. I also pick up a blasting wand. The reason I pick up this is because I don't have enough money for needlessly large rod, and blasting wand builds into several things that I'm eventually going to get on him. Namely, Rhylight's Crystal Scepter, Rabadon's Death Cap, and Void Staff. So I return to lane.
Rampage.
And at this point what I'm going to do is put pressure on mid. I want to keep the pressure on mid so that they can't really roam. And so I know that things are going on top lane, but Vayne and I decide to just put pressure on the mid tower. Now, something you're going to see me do is what I call an ult flash. Basically, you ult and then you flash. The reason that this works is because during your ult animation, you can still flash. So what will happen is your ult will start to go off, you'll flash, and the ult will go off in whatever direction you flashed. So if you flash forward, the ult will go off forward. If you flash backwards, the ult will go off backwards. Essentially, it's a way to cut down on the cast time of your ultimate by using it and then flashing. You can flash and then ult, but if you flash, you still have the ramp up time of where she starts screaming, where you have to cast it. So I always prefer to ult and then flash. And I do it on this Twitch. I know that he's coming into farm, this next wave that's coming up, so I know that he'll be facing me. I know that he's farming the lane, and I know that he's looking at minions. He thinks that he's safe. See how I started the ult before I flashed? Now, at this next part, we start to get condensed upon, but I know my damage output. It's something that you need to know with Cassiopeia. You need to know how much you can do. Because right here, I use my E on him, and I ignite him immediately, and I leave it, because I know that my ignite will kill him. And then I try to help the Vayne, but I realize that that's not going to happen. But we're able to turn it immediately on this guy. Unfortunately, he gets away because of the frickin' lantern. So there's no reason to really push, so we leave the lane. We push it up and then leave. You'll notice that I fought wards. I have 2 wards on top of my trinket. This is something you should be doing all game long. The warding is not just the jungler and the support's job, it's your job as well, as any mid. And so what I do now is, now that we have a moment, I warded here, I warded here, and I warded here, or here. I didn't know that this ping was here at the time. But I basically just lit up their entire bottom jungle so that we can see them at every moment. Vision wins games, guys. If it's your job to make sure that your team has vision, especially if those that are most responsible, the jungle and the support, aren't providing the vision. So let's speed it up a little bit. I picked up a needlessly large rod now because it's really strong. And here I begin to chase because I'm confident in my ability to get the kills. Unfortunately, I make a mistake because I think, I'm going to come up here in a second, and I think that the Amumu is following me to help me out, but he leaves, which basically gets me killed because I get on a 3v1. I think the Amumu's going to follow me in because I know he has ult, but instead he doesn't. He just kind of leaves me. He's chasing Twitch with Renekton for some reason. That was the first mistake. You're incredibly squishy, so if you're caught off by yourself, there's a high probability that you're going to get destroyed. So at this point, we're just trading kills. They're able to push down our mid tower. Vayne gets caught and kind of starts to throw, especially here. You'll see this Blitzcrank, for whatever reason, refuses to grab anything that's like right on top of him. Him and the Thresh were dancing around each other, but he refuses to grab him. Like, right, I think he's saving it for something better, but seriously, just get the kill. But he refuses to grab him. I see this blue here. I probably should have killed the Thresh, but instead I opt to take the blue. And now, I know that they have to back because they're low, so I'm going to go ahead and pressure bot lane.
goes on. We're pressuring this bot tower for a while. Cassie's actually pretty good with sieging because of her. She can basically nullify zones. I get caught here, but it doesn't matter because they have no follow-up and our blitz lands good and we are able to get a kill. So we decide to keep pushing. I make a mistake here. I overextend way too far. I land a really good ult, but I'm instantly vaporized. Luckily our team comes out ahead. Just barely ahead. But I should not have overextended that far. Again, Cassiopeia is very squishy, and if her damage is DPS based, it's not burst damage, so she can't afford to just die. She needs to be alive the whole team fight to put out as much damage as possible. Anyway, at this point, what you see is I buy a Rabadon's Death Cat, but I instantly, I don't sell it, I return it to the store because I realize that what I want is not damage. I'm already putting out enough damage. What I want is more defense, especially armor. So instead I opt to use the needlessly large rod I had to buy a Zhonya's Hourglass. I sell it, I leave base, I go farm blue, and then I return later to pick up the Zhonya's Hourglass. So I take this blue buff. And you'll see, here's an interesting, I start chasing this Thresh, and he's able to land a hook, and I see I'm being condensed upon. What I did immediately was I flashed into the bush. This is to cut vision. Unless this bush was warded, they've now lost vision of me. Well, actually I got ignited, but the idea is you want to basically cut as much vision as you can from them so that they can't all in you. So I flash into this bush, and then you'll see I drop, I use my Q for a speed boost later. I get an awesome ult, land my Q here so that I can get the speed boost and I run away. At this point I realize that I'm no use to this battle, so I do the next best thing. Most people will just back at this point because they're low, or they'll try to go back into the team fight only to die. Instead, I realize that I'm most useful by going mid and pushing while this whole fiasco is going top. So I go ahead and push mid, take about half the tower down before Jay shows up. One thing to note is that you'll see me do here is I land my Q on him in order to speed myself up while I escape. Another good option is to drop your W because the slow is actually really nice. Speed it up, just farming wraiths. Epic battles over here. We actually start to throw a little bit because we start getting caught out, but you'll see what I'm talking about. I back, I pick up my Zhonya's Hourglass, and I'm gonna head over here immediately. Vayne gets caught, he gets caught out. Now Amumu and him get caught out. They're running. That was a clutch Amumu ult, and he straight up misses it. I go in and ult all three of them in the face. Blitzcrank saves my life by pulling me back. I should not have been that close. This guy comes in, and I knew that he was coming around. Blitzcrank, once again, this is what I'm talking about. Blitzcrank just fails. Like, he has so many opportunities to, like, do anything, but he just does nothing. And now, Blitzcrank's gonna run into them and just, like, let's see what I'm talking about. He basically throws even harder, because he starts face-checking over here at the dragon before his team is anywhere near him. We come over here to contest dragon, basically blow it, because Blitz just, like, before anyone is there to help him, he just gets caught. I get caught. I Zhonya's, but it doesn't help because I die. The next item I start building for is Rylai's Crystal Scepter. I do this because I want to get more health, I am getting bursted down quite easily, but Rylai's Crystal Scepter provides the utility of the slow, which is really nice, and more specifically, it provides me with a little extra health. I don't need more damage right now, so Void Staff and Rabadon's Death Cap are not really good options because I'm already doing a decent amount of damage, so instead I opt for the Rylai's Crystal Scepter. Farming the lanes. Okay, so at this point, we're going to engage in this area, and Zed's going to catch me by surprise by coming through this bush, and I Zonia's his ultimate, which is something that basically, this is the reason I got Zonia's Hourglass. I rushed it. It's so that I could Zonia's his ultimate, so it does 0 damage to me. This essentially saves my life, and we go on to win this fight. Amumu engages, he gets caught. We come in, and you'll see the Zed come down. Zed tries to engage on me, he ults me, and I immediately Zonia's. And now I'm going to get a clutch backwards. I flashed backwards and ulted forwards. And what this did is I hit all 3 of them. And this allows me to escape and we clean up. At this point, because we just aced them, we pushed out mid-tower, obviously. Take the tower and then back pick the chases up. I go ahead and back and I pick up my Rylai's Crystal Scepter, finish that up. Now, the next thing I'll buy in this case would be either Rabadon's Death Cap or Void Staff, depending on whether or not they have Magic Resist on their team. If they've started stacking Magic Resist, obviously I'll go for Void Staff. If not, I'll go for Rabadon's Death Cap. We're gonna start to siege. We're winning the game, so we know that we can siege now. Especially since there's a free inhibitor. We're over here, and actually, Blitz lands a really nice pick on the Kha'Zix. Or no, I guess it's a and Blitz. So once we pick that, we know that the inhibitor's free, because it's a 4v5 and we're already winning. What's gonna happen now is we're gonna engage in a team fight, and you're gonna see something that doesn't just have to do with Cassiopeia, it has to do with all mid laners, and that's how to prioritize targets. The Zed will be right in front of me, but instead I opt to go all in on the Twitch, because I know that he puts out more damage, and I know that the Zed is going to die regardless of whether I'm damaging him or not. So I get caught out, he goes in for some reason, and I ult here. I ult here, and now I have the Zed here. I can either go on him, but he's certainly going to die. He's got no escape, or I can go on the more damage carry, the Twitch in the background, and I opt to go for him instead. This makes it so that he can't escape, and the Zed dies anyway without my help. You're gonna see something that a lot of people in low elo do. They just basically suicide. This Kha'Zix knows that he can get a kill on a Blitzcrank, so he basically suicides. What he did was he got a kill off the Blitzcrank in exchange for dying once and giving away 3 assists. It's nowhere worth it, and his team is already behind. So like, it's nowhere near worth what he just did. He basically leaves the mid tower undefended, so we could go ahead and take that. So we take this tower and then we leave. We don't have enough time to take both towers. And now you'll see me. When we're backing and they're coming up and our jungler is low, that's the perfect opportunity for them to rush Baron. And I know this, so I go ahead and temporarily ward Baron until we can get a more permanent ward on it. And then I go ahead and back. I glance at their item builds and I realize that they're starting to stack Magic Resist, so instead of opting for Rabadon's, I go for Void Staff. I have just enough for Void Staff and it's a great item, so I go ahead and straight up pick that up. So the game continues on, we're dancing around this area, and I'm going to see Twitch poke his head out bot. At that moment I call for my team to do Baron. This is because if you have their AD carry, their largest damage dealer, in bot lane, they can't really contest this, especially since they're losing. So we go ahead and pretty much uncontested victory. They also have no vision on it, so it's essentially... And after this, we essentially just push in and eventually win the game. With Baron, and since we're already way ahead, we eventually just catch them all out. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this kind of walkthrough of a game of mine with Cassiopeia. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. If not, you can check out my guide on Mobile It's also on Lol King, though it hasn't been updated there. And let me know what you think about the video, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. I'm more than willing to answer them, and I'll be checking on here daily. Thank you very much.